My name is Clarke Murphy. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Russell Reynolds Associates, and thank you for joining our virtual event on purpose-driven leadership. We're joined today by Hubert, Joly, who I'll introduce momentarily. But thank you for joining. We have people literally around the world, in the US, Europe, Middle East, Asia, Australia. Thank you for arriving early and late in your day, and we look forward to this discussion. You know, I believe you're here because you want to understand purpose-driven business results, purpose-driven companies and communities. And that's part of what we'll talk about, as well as your own path, your career, your company, your community. But it starts with leadership. And specifically, it starts, we believe, with a leader who can integrate social and environmental considerations into business strategy, making the long-term sustainability and the resilience of our world a top business priority, while also delivering financial success. I saw a quote this morning that literally came up earlier today, Colin Mayer describing purpose is not about profits. It's about producing profitable solutions to the problems of the people and the planet. Producing solutions. And profits are a derivative of that. And so those that understand this, the integration of sustainability and resilience and profits, we believe is a sustainable leader. Russell Reynolds Associates and Hubert are very, very focused on sustainable leaders and those who can succeed in this evolving world pre-COVID. This was underway already when we began the discussion in August of 19 around stakeholders versus shareholders, which Hubert will come into today. So our goal, and we will take questions, use the Q&A box on your screen, I'm sure you're well familiar with by now. But I think today, unlike many, many webinars and virtual discussions over the past year, what we would like to think is that you will come away with some action items for your career, for your company, for your evolution as a leader. And we'll talk about evolving leadership and how Hubert and I personally have changed and grown. So think about in your questions, how does this relate to me? How do I create purpose in my career? How do I buy into or create purpose for my company? And hopefully we walk away with some of those. I am joined today by Hubert Joly, the former chairman and chief executive of Best Buy, who was just published last week, May 4th, I think, Hubert, if I have it correct, The Heart of Business. And Hubert not only is going to talk about the story of Best Buy, which I'd love him to start with, but also his own journey, how he arrived, having started as a hard-charging analytical McKinsey consulting, telling others what to do, to then finding himself at the end of a long table where everybody looked at him and said, what do? We need your guidance. So Hubert, welcome. We appreciate you being here.
Clarke, it's such a delight. I so look forward to our conversation and, of course, the questions from our global audience.
Before we get into the Best Buy story, just a snapshot, which everyone's always curious to hear the stories. Tell us just the path to arriving at Best Buy from a career perspective, and what you brought along the way in your career, because that's many people who have logged in today are on this journey and would love to hear how you arrived at Best Buy, and then we'll talk about the story.
Yeah, Clarke, there was never a plan. The fact that a French guy growing up, in Eastern France and Lorraine would end up in Minneapolis leading Best, it was never a plan. So my journey has been, I was first a McKinsey consultant, and then for about a dozen years. And then I decided that I didn't want to be a consultant for the rest of my life. And then I was engaged in a series of turnaround and transformations at different companies, EDS, then Vivendi Universal, Carlson Wagonlit Travel, which is a travel management company, and then Carlson Companies, which is headquartered in Minneapolis, which is a travel and hospitality company. The move from one place to the other was always related to people with whom I interacted. So most important lesson in that journey from a career standpoint is try to minimize the number of people you piss off along the way, and really focus at each stage on being the best version of yourself and trying to produce an impact and serving others, as opposed to using your elbows to climb to the top. So in short order, that was my journey. But maybe I talk about, because everybody's going to have their own journey. But what were some of the milestones that led me to become somebody who believes in human magic more than in analytics? And it was 2 or 3 moments, Clarke. One was 30 years ago, a client of mine actually told me, Hubert, the purpose of a corporation is not to make money, which I later repeated to our shareholders when I was the CEO of Best Buy. It's an outcome. And in business, you have the people imperative, you have the right people, properly equipped and motivated. The business imperative, meaning you have customers who need to be happy. And financial result is really an outcome, a bit like Colin was describing. But you shouldn't manage it as a goal. In fact, one of the very concrete tips he gave me is when you do your monthly business review, don't start with financial results, end with financial results. Start with talking about people and organization, customers and products, and then financial results. If you flip it, you're going to spend your entire meeting on financial results, which is, again, just an outcome. So that was a first milestone. Another one was, again, about 30 years ago, 2 friends of mine who were monks asked me to write an article about the philosophy and theology of work. Why do we work? Which is such we all of us spend so much time working, right? So it's good to ask the question. Of course, from a spiritual standpoint, you can go to, work is a curse because some guy sinned in paradise, right? Or more 60s and 70s, we work so that we can do something else that's really fun, right?
Right.
But there's this alternative view that no, work is part of our quest for meaning as individuals, right? It's part of our fulfillment, or I quote the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, work is love made visible. And that deeply influenced me, especially if you see the company as a human organization made of individuals working together. Well, we're still human beings working at a company, so our goal has to somehow contribute to the common good, which leads to the discussion of how do you define a company's purpose and so forth.
So a question. So right now we have a bunch of people who have deadlines in 2, 3, 6, or 8 hours today. Yeah. And they've said, I want to listen to this guy and see what the heart of business is. And they're saying, you've lost your mind. I have to deliver these things this week. You can't tell me you have that philosophy at McKinsey when you work 7 days a week around the clock, of which you reflect in your book about some personal struggles as you had that kind of lifestyle. So realistically, can someone who's in the midpoint of their career personalize what you're saying, or do they just have to grind it out? And then that's the luxury that comes with being a senior executive.
I think this question of purpose is in the heart of every one of us as individuals. Now, Clarke, as you know, I teach at Harvard Business School now. I'm involved at HEC Paris, and I have kids, right? So when we are in our 20s or in our early 30s, it's hard, right, to be clear about our purpose. It's really a journey that gets us to defining it, and it's a lifelong journey. But I'll share one experience, which I think was also a turning point for me. So, rewind 20 years ago, I'd been a partner at McKinsey. I was on the executive team of Vivendi Universal, a large multinational media and entertainment company. And so in many ways, I'd been successful, right? If you had assessed me at the time, you say, this guy's maybe a rising star or something. And then I stepped back and, to paraphrase David Brooks, I was at the top of my first mountain, and there was emptiness. It was nothing. There was no meaning. And so, why I won't comment on the day-to-day, what should I do in the next 3 hours? That led me to stepping back and revisiting my life and trying to discern my calling in life. In fact, one exercise we do at HBS with the new CEOs is ask them to write their retirement speech. How do you want to be remembered, right? But that's not just for CEOs, to your point. One of the questions that a store general manager at Best Buy would ask all of the associates in his stores is, what is your dream? At Best Buy, outside of Best Buy, what is your dream? And he then said, my job is to help you achieve your dream. So this question of purpose, our own purpose, and the curiosity, by the way, of the purpose of people around us and how we can help every one of us, self included, but also people around us, connect what drives them with the purpose of the company. That's when you start seeing human magic happen.
Yeah. I love this phrase, human magic, and we'll come back to that. If I can just stick on this same point. So I'm a vice president in Germany for an industrial business. I'm listening to this discussion. And how do we make this relatable? So purpose is to solve problems, I believe. And if anything we've learned at Russell Reynolds Associates in interviewing people over the last year is they're not walking across the street to just get a promotion and run another business. They say, I can just stay here and do that. So perhaps I'd like you to reflect for a second. How do I, in my company, say, I want to solve a problem? I want to be part of the solution, because I think that inspires me, gets me energized about going back in tomorrow morning. Did you have moments in the career pre-Best Buy where you needed to go log into solving a problem or get fired up for the next day? Not the journey of success and revelation, but the journey of overcoming an obstacle or a moment of uncertainty in your career to then go forward. Because I think that's part of today is I want to be energized about my path to be a great leader.
So for me, it really starts with a journey of self-reflection. And there's many ways for every one of us to do this. But I think, by the way, one of the great lessons from last year, if you were going to be a great leader last year during the pandemic is not over, but at the beginning, during the lockdown, if you couldn't go outside, you'd better go inside and try to figure out how you want it to be remembered. What were going to be the principles that were going to drive your activities, irrespective, because I think our message is right, like valid for all levels, all leaders. And by the way, everybody's a leader because at the minimum, we're a leader of our life, right? And so I remember, when I saw Corey Barry, my successor at Best Buy as the CEO, she laid out principles on how Best Buy was going to go through the crisis. And this was beautiful. Like many companies, she said, number one priority is the safety of our employees and our customers. And if that means closing the stores, that's what we'll do. Number two, it's delaying as long as humanly possible any layoff, any furlough. And number three, making sure we come out of this crisis stronger as a company, meaning don't do anything stupid like be driven by your quarterly earnings. Make sure that you come out strong. Why was she able to articulate these principles? Because she had reflected that what was key in her life is stewardship. Making sure that she leaves whatever she's given, she leaves it in a better place than before. So I think our own journey, and I think one of the ways to think about our own journey from a professional standpoint is this intersection of four circles. I think many of us will be familiar with it. What the world needs, what I'm good at uniquely, what I'm passionate about, and of course how I can make money, right? These four circles. And the intersection is the sweet spot. And by the way, that works both for me as an individual, and then that can work to define the purpose of the company. And the last thing I'll say, Clarke, is if you find yourself in a company that's not aligned with what's important to you, you have options, right? We always have choices, most of the time. You can either try to reshape, the company, or at least the part of the company you're responsible for, or you can change your values. Don't recommend that. And option three is leave. And back in 1999, I decided to leave EDS. I was the president of EDS France, the new CEO in Plano, Texas. All he cared about was profit. And there was a hiring freeze. We were growing like crazy. There was a hiring freeze so that he could hit his quarterly earnings. I said, this is okay. The world is big. You can have EDS and then I'll explore the rest of the world. Well, now, I realize that it's not always possible, but I think we have to see what is our true north, right?
Yeah, I agree. And so that brings us, or let's go to Best Buy now. So again,
yes, let's go shopping. Let's go shopping.
let's go shopping. Let's go buy some electronics at a low price. So there are people in parts of the world that may not know the Best Buy story as well as North America. So to just set a little bit of a frame of a enormous company, an electronics price war, running to bankruptcy, it would appear, and you decide you're going to take that job. So let's talk about that arrival and the story a little bit for those who may not know Best Buy well.
Yeah, so we're rewinding to 2012. So Best Buy, in every country around the world, there's at least one or two big consumer electronics retailer, right? So Best Buy, of course, in the US, North America, largest market in the world, and had been the leader in that space. Amazing American iconic success story up until probably 2009. Ironically, Circuit City has just died, so Best Buy declares victory. We won, right? And then you have complacency settling in. And so in 2012, everybody thinks the company is going to die. It's interesting how quickly that can happen because of Amazon going to kill us, companies like Apple and Microsoft and Sony building their own stores, and frankly, a quality of service that had deteriorated significantly. So when I got the call, I was really surprised because I knew nothing about retail, and the place was a mess. But I was convinced to study, and what I saw is that actually the world needed Best Buy. As customers, for some of our purchases, we need a place where we can buy, we can see, touch, feel the products and ask questions. So customers needed Best Buy, and importantly, the vendors needed Best Buy, right? Because they need a place where to showcase the fruit of their billions of dollars of R&D investment. And the issues at Best Buy, it turned out, were all self-inflicted. Like prices were too high, online was horrendous, supply chain was terrible, the stores had deteriorated. Good news with self-inflicted problems, you can't actually solve this. Right. And so that convinced me that we could actually effectuate a turnaround.
So what did you do first? And how did we form solutions to these are systemic issues: price war, online, self-inflicted, poor service. Where do you start? And who do you bring on board first? Back to stakeholders. You have the board who's saying stem the drop. You have employees saying we're losing. Institutional investors may dump the stock. Where do you start?
Yeah, so it was about fixing the company. Interestingly enough, a lot of advice I was getting from analysts and whatnot was cut. The usual story of turnarounds, right? Close stores, fire people. Well, I looked, and all of the stores were profitable, Clarke. So what's the point of closing stores? And in my view, usually people are not the problem, except maybe at the top. People are the solution. So the turnaround we effectuated, in terms of the what, it was pretty basic. We ensured our prices were competitive. We invested in the online experience. We increased the speed of shipping so that today we ship as fast as Amazon. We redid the stores. We partnered with the world's foremost tech companies. That may be the innovative thing we did, because we used their money to really significantly enhance the customer experience in the stores by doing these stores within a store. And then we did take some cost out. But more interesting is the how. And the turnaround was completely human-centric. So the philosophy that you and I are talking about, of being purpose-driven, pursuing a noble purpose, putting people at the center, embracing all stakeholders, and treating profit as an outcome. That's not just a philosophy for the good times, also applies in the bad times. What did we do concretely? My first week on the job, I spent it in a store in St. Cloud, Minnesota, listening to the frontliners, right? Because that's where the truth is, at the interaction with the customers. And these guys on the front line, they knew what needed to be done. And so spending a week there was incredibly impactful. Started with people as well at the top. So I'm a bit of a Maoist. You may or may not know this about me, Clarke. I believe fish rot from the head. So in a turnaround, the approach to change management is often to change at least a part of management at the top. It's all, again, about people. And then it's people first, it's also people last. So my turnaround manual is first about how do I grow revenue, and if I'm going to cut costs, which often you have to, first focus on non-salary expenses, which is all of the elements of the cost structure that have nothing to do with people.
Right.
And you cut headcount as a last resort, if the rest is not sufficient. And then if you do, there's a way to do it, where you can try to redeploy people and so forth. And then the last element of the application of this people-centric philosophy is that your role as a leader is to create energy.
Right.
And it's all focused on people within the company. It's about co-creating the plan as opposed to telling people what to do. I learned that lesson early on. And it's about getting going, right? Getting some energy going by starting to implement. You don't need a perfect plan, right? But start implementing. That creates confidence. Celebrate early wins. And if there's problems, then talk about it and work together to solve them. The investors at the beginning, we did an investor day after 2 months, which was crazy, right? 2 months after joining, but for a variety of reasons, we didn't have a choice. When we presented a high-level plan, renewable, they yawned, right? There's no words that are going to convince them, so it's actions and results. And so it was really working with the employees, focusing on the customers, partnering with our vendors, refusing zero-sum games, right? Zero-sum games, there's a pandemic around COVID, another pandemic is the philosophy of the world around, the only way for you to win, Clarke, is for me to lose. That's crazy, right? And so that's a game changer. And we didn't forget in these hard times, community. We continued with our recycling program. This is when we launched our Best Buy Teen Tech Centers for disadvantaged kids. Because we said we're going to do this right. But the first focus was people. That's really what the focus was.
We've talked a lot at Russell Reynolds in the last couple of years about dealing with complexity, the ability to look at multi-systems at the same time, environment, performance, suppliers, employees. And then around agility, the ability to deal with ambiguity and keep going forward, plunging forward. You say you don't need a perfect plan. And we're testing executives for success around dealing with ambiguity, but action-oriented, including others, Hubert. You must have walked into a few of these stores, and again, they'd be like, how are we going to do this? How did you win? How did you lead with confidence? But you say again and again, you unleash the human magic, which was that the organization needed to believe they could save this company. So again, these first steps, we talked about Investor Day, we'll talk about the board meeting later, which I think is quite funny, but tell me about convincing the store managers or the employees this is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, in general, people at companies, they want to do a good job, they want to win. When the company is not winning, you always have to look at the top. If it's winning, you have to look on the front line. And so my focus was really making sure we had the right team at the top, but really focusing on the frontliners. And the building the trust with the frontliners was based on, you'll see everybody at Best Buy's got 2 ears and just 1 mouth and 2 hands, right? So you get the idea. The fact that we listened to what they felt they needed, and then we worked on our say-do ratio, right? And we did what we said we were going to do, and that was also helpful with the investors. It means people then feel respected, and they say, "Oh, okay, they're doing stuff," and then of course that cycle leads to early results. But even then, because life is not linear, when there's a hiccup, and we had at least 1 or 2, then people stay with you because you've built the trust. So the key thing was in that early stage was being focused on the frontliners and listening. In the second phase, so we went from Renew Blue to building the new blue. It was different. The first phase, it was to turn this around, there was really only a few decisions we had to make, and I quickly listed them. Once we had saved the company, when you go to creating a growth environment and trying to create a company that employees and customers and vendors and shareholders and communities are going to love, it's a different task. And it's more about creating the environment where everybody, can have, their magic be unleashed. And, I talk about being French, I have to talk about a recipe and 5 ingredients, right?
Right.
And the ingredients of human magic are, it starts with the idea that the old recipe of top down, tell people what to do doesn't work. We could do a survey on this call and ask people to raise their hands if they like to be told what to do. I can bet that nobody's going to raise their hand, in general. And so it's more about intrinsic motivation. And so the 5 ingredients is, the first one is connecting dreams. Back to this question of, what drives you as an individual and how I can make sure that, you can connect what drives you with your work, which took me a long time to figure out how to do this. The second one is genuine human connections. A company is a human organization, right? So making sure everybody feel that they belong and that they're respected. My compatriot said, René Descartes of the Cartesian philosophy said, I think, therefore I am. I think he's wrong. It's I am seen, therefore I am. And it's irrespective of the size of the company, it starts with people around us, the 10 people around us, and then the 100 people that we touch indirectly, and being curious about what drives them. And they have the environment where they can do their job. It's about autonomy, creating an environment where people within a frame, can use all of their body parts, their brain, but also their heart and their soul to do, what the mission is. It's about the individual growth of the employees through individualized coaching and career development. It's about creating a growth environment. That sounds very soft.
Yeah.
When you get into the details, that's really what can unleash this human magic thing.
Can you talk about, we've spoken in the past about the break room and about, I was quite curious how hands-on you were at the end of phase 1 into phase 2 in inspiring, directing, guiding the managers to engage with the individual employees to believe, to talk about the break room and the little things written up in the break room.
Yes, because the reason why this is important is that many companies have bet on this call have embarked on the purpose journey, right? This is now, everybody's on that journey. So you see companies that do the work, they develop the purpose, they write it down, and then many of us are stuck, right? How do we make it a reality? So there's work to be done on making it the cornerstone of the strategy, but even then, it doesn't reach the, in our case, 100,000 employees at the company. And this is where I've learned so much from our frontliners. Right? It was a store general manager in Boston, right? He would ask every one of the associates in his store, what is your dream at Best Buy or outside of Best Buy? Write it down in the break room. And then he would say, my job is to help you achieve your dream. And we're going to work together towards that goal. The other breakthrough, Clarke, where I finally got it, because the irony in this corporate world is that the CEO gets a lot of credit for the actions of the company. You and I know that it's a myth, and so I have to give credit to the amazing team at Best Buy. Once we have crafted our corporate purpose, it did not really penetrate widely, because imagine, so our corporate purpose was enrich lives through technology by addressing key human needs. Imagine you and I walk into the Best Buy store around the corner and we tell everybody in the store, we have great news. We have a new strategy, a new purpose. It's to enrich lives through technology by addressing key human needs. And the blue shirt are going to say, you're saying what? You want me to do what when I take my shift at 10 a.m.? And so we had a team working on our brand identity and what it really meant. And that led to organizing a training in our stores. One weekend, a Saturday in June of one year, we closed all of the stores for a few hours. And we got into small groups, no PowerPoint, no video, no message from the CEO. And in small group, share with each other your life story. Right? So I was paired with a young woman She had been in an abusive relationship with an ex-boyfriend. She had been homeless, and Best Buy was our home, our family.
Right.
So all of a sudden, I don't see her only as an employee, I see her as a human being. And then second, talk to each other about somebody in your life who's an inspiring friend. What does he or she look like, and what do they do? Okay, what we're going to try to do, and this is already something we do when we are at our best, we're going to try to treat each other and the customers as human beings, not walking wallets. And we're going to try to be for each other and the customers an inspiring friends. All right.
Okay, so you're right. People are going, okay, I can do this at a granular level.
Yep.
Let's come back out. You go to board meetings in the first year, and the board needs to know this company is going to make it. It was not certain by a long shot in the first year that this Best Buy was going to make it. And you unroll your strategy and your approach to the board. What do they have to say? They're your bosses.
This was, different CEOs are going to have different views of the board. I've always had the view that having a great board was something that could give me superhuman powers to the management team, and that we were going to work together. And that meant, by the way, that had to be transparent and vulnerable with them. That board meetings were not a dog and pony show. Initially in my career, the first time I was a CEO, yes, I was going to tell them everything I knew and how we were going to do this. And my only objective was for them to say, oh my God, this is the best plan and story we've ever seen. At Best Buy, it was different. I shared with them my impression and what we were going to do, and then asked them for advice. And so that's what we, which meant that, and that's where, you've been involved in a number of companies where you and I have gotten to know each other, where you helped redo the board. And so I shared with them my impression that, the problems were self-inflicted and that we were going to fix them. We did develop a financial plan that we then presented to the street, and then we kept them on the journey. Right? These things are the days where you would present a 5-year plan and then execute during 5 years are long gone. You talked about agility. That's what it is to you. So I have this image, Clarke, of the bicycle, right? Have you tried to direct a bicycle at standstill, Clarke? Really hard, you fall, right? And if the bicycle is moving, it doesn't matter if it's not moving exactly in the right direction, because then you can adjust course. So we told them, generally, this is what we're going to focus on, and then we're going to keep you on the journey. And then when we struggle, we'll let you know and we'll ask you for advice. And I'll just mention one moment. So now increasingly boards do assessments with the help of a third party, right? An outside consultant that comes in and speak with all of the board members and management team. And so we did this for the first time, probably around 2016, 2017, and things were going well, right? I mean, we had saved the company, the share price had quadrupled or something like that. But Susan, who did the assessment, she shared with me the reports and the head of nominating and governance. I was surprised. I was shocked. In the report, I was expecting that the main recommendation was build a statue for the management team because they're like gods, right? No, they actually had suggestions, things that we could do better. And it took me time, and I think that's one of the journeys, right? To learn to deal with feedback and feed forward, right? How can I deliberately decide that if there are things that are not perfect, these are opportunities. And so it took me a week or two to say, oh, actually, the list of things that they are highlighting where we can do better, this is fabulous. These are their suggestions on the work we need to do going forward, because nobody can change what we did last year. And I actually completely agree with them. These are things we're actually working on that we can get better. So let's agree that this is going to be our agenda. And we're going to work together. And I'm going to, by the way, follow up with each of them and say, what advice do you have for me on each of these items where we think we can do better? What advice do you have for me?
So I might interject. We're doing Q&A at the end, but and I invite others to keep submitting questions. The questions come in that it's right now's the moment. When from your perspective, at what stage do you want your team, or can you believe in your team, or allow your team to come to you and say, I want to solve a problem? and when they acknowledge they have a solution. When does this, or when did it, but your lessons learned now of when is that moment, when can they have confidence to come forward with a problem and a potential solution to their leader or their chief executive?
I would say it's any time, right? I mean, that's actually what you want. And there was a breakthrough moment for me at the juncture between the turnaround, Renew Blue, and the growth phase that I think deals with this a little bit. Because again, my conviction is that our role as leaders is not to come up with all of the solutions, but more to create an environment where leaders at all levels can actually create that magic. And in the turnaround phase, of course, this was a more directive environment, right? When the ship is sinking, let's agree that the captain has to make some decisions. Now, it would take a lot of input, but I was a key decision maker. And for the first time in my career, Clarke, I was actually the oldest member of the executive team. I moved from being the youngest to being the oldest, in just one day. Yeah. And so there was a bit of a parent-child relationship, which was not healthy. Right. And so I realized that, and as we were moving to the growth phase, I said, I need to be able to change the way we work. And so very concretely, I shared with the team, these are, the 4 or 5 decisions I'm responsible for, right? That would be the strategy for the company, who's on the team, culture, major investments, M&A, that's it. There's a few other decisions where I'd love to be consulted, like, on the brand. I think I'd like to be consulted. The dividend policy, my CFO, if you can come to me before you talk to the board, I'd appreciate that. But I don't need to be the decision maker. And what we did is we clarified, who and at what level in the organization the decision-making authority was going to be. Mm. And how decisions were going to get made. And in particular, one thing that was slowing us down is that if an executive would raise only an eyebrow or just maybe frown, say, "Oh, I'm not sure," that would freeze everything. And so we were in the way. And so instead we said, the decision maker, who is as low in the organization as humanly possible, they may decide that they're going to consult with a few people, team members and functions, but at the end of the day, it's their decision, and then they tell us what they've decided. And creating that environment really changed things. So I didn't want people to come to me on how they were going to solve a bunch of things where I was not a decision maker. Now, if they wanted some advice and say, "Do you have any experience with this, or anybody you think could help us?" I'd be happy to help. But it's a big shift of moving from the know-it-all, the smartest person in the room, to somebody who's there to create the environment where amazing things can happen.
Yeah. One thing, Russell Reynolds just did a survey of about 1,500 chief executives and C-suite board members, 53 countries. And one of the questions is about diversity, equity, inclusion. And not surprisingly, happily, about 70% of those leaders said their team is actively focused on DE&I. You were a decade ago on this, and your board, the face of your board changed, the face of your executive team changed. You did it because you drove it, not because someone told you to. How, why learnings at this point?
So this was also a journey, and I think the journey is not over, because I'm not surprised that everybody in the world says diversity and inclusion is important, and they're working on it. The question is actually, are you getting things done? Are you getting results? And my journey started when probably 10 years ago. Remember, McKinsey was doing work on how diverse teams are more effective. Diverse companies, or companies that are led by diverse teams, are more profitable. And so intellectually, I understood this. But as we all know, there's a huge difference between understanding here and then doing and so forth. And so I seen that gender diversity was really helpful because it changed the dynamic of a team. I believe that, if it had been Lehman Brothers and Sisters as opposed to Lehman Brothers, it would have been a different outcome. And so that was one step. But the biggest step for me was around racial diversity. And it was about in 2016 when our employee engagement at Best Buy was really increasing, was going through the roof, but I could see differences across race and ethnicity in particular. So I did focus groups, skip level, with middle managers and employees. And I took a punch in the gut, Clarke, when I really felt the pain of our Black African-American colleagues. And I grew up in France, so I'm going to use that as my excuse that I didn't know. Okay, who needs an excuse? But I actually use it to my advantage. I need to learn. I need to learn what it is. And it was gut-wrenching. I was fortunate, as part of our D&I program, we put in place a reverse mentoring program where a wonderful woman, Laura Gladney, young African-American woman, it was paired with me, and I would meet with her regularly, and she taught me. She told me and she taught me, and I could feel in my gut what it was. And then if you can marry, your head and your heart and your gut and your soul, I think we need to lead with all of our body parts. That's where you get the energy and the sense of urgency around this. But again, from a leadership standpoint, it's about, my most frequently used phrase these days, Clarke, is, my name is Hubert and I don't know, but I'm going to find out. So I went on to a journey to learn. I remember meeting with Melody Hobson, who is now the chairwoman at Starbucks, who taught me so much about how to approach this. And talking about the board, one of the things she told me is you cannot be who you cannot see. And so she said, diversity at the top is really important to, amplify the movement. And that's when when I stepped down from the board, we had a majority of women and 3 African-American directors. And the board is actually the easiest place where to get this done, right? How hard is it if you have a board with 10 people? How hard is it to find 5 great women and 2, 3, 4 diverse board members?
Right. It's not. It's the executive ranks that matter and have impact. There's one thing you talk about. I'm Hubert Joly. I don't know anything. You and I have spoken before. We're probably a little older than our audience, at least I am. And we, as a child, learned about our IQ, and then as young executives, we talked about EQ. And I think the world is now focused on LQ. What can you learn? Can you change yourself? Can you grow? And that is how more successful executives will accelerate their careers.
So everyone, we're listening to Clarke Murphy. He's just said something really, really fundamental. Make a note, LQ, right? How do we grow forever? The minute we stop growing, it's over. So for me, Clarke, I give credit to my coach, Marshall Goldsmith, with whom I started to work in 2009. And before that, if somebody had told me that Jack or Mary were working with a coach, I would have said, what's wrong with them, right? Who needs a coach? Are they in trouble? Are they going to be fired? And then I said, I'm stupid because, I like to play tennis with a pro because I want to improve my forehand. Or when I ski, I like to ski with an instructor because I want to improve my skiing in the moguls or in the deep powder. And Marshall is this wonderful guy who's invented the idea of helping successful leaders get better.
Right.
Which is a much better process than, this feedback session where you're being told these are 3 things you're doing well and 3 things that you didn't do so well. How draining is this? And the process that Marshall has is just wonderful. He does a 360, so he talks to everybody around you, comes back, first tells you everything you're doing well, 1 memo, because take the time to digest this, Hubert, and then the other memo. And then he told me, Hubert, you don't need to do anything. It's your choice. It's your choice.
Right.
There's no God who tells you that you have. Maybe there's a God that tells you that maybe you should consider. But I think his point is you get to decide. And so 3 months after I joined Best Buy, I actually told my team, look, this turnaround. Let's agree this turnaround is going to be difficult, right? Reason why I know this is that everybody thinks we're going to die. So and that means that all of us are going to need to be the best leader we can be. And that starts with me. So I have a coach, he's going to come in, ask you for feedback. And then, of course, I had to go through the excruciating pain for me, a recovering perfectionist, still very much a perfectionist at the time, of telling him, thank you for all of the good things. And these are the three things I've decided to work on. Number one, number two, number three. And I'm going to follow up with you on what advice you have for me in each of these areas. And in 4 months from now, I follow up one more time to see how much progress I'm doing. And as a leader, that's a very practical thing you can do, because then it's not only helpful for me, but also signal to everybody that it was okay as a leader to want to get better, and then to help each other on our learning journey. That change, I think that was a game changer for us.
Okay, Hubert, we have so many questions, you won't believe it. So we're going to change a little format. We're going to do lightning round for the next 14 minutes. I'd love you to answer questions no more than a minute, because my phone is blowing up with questions. You've given all good news. What went wrong? And how did you deal with it? What went wrong? Because we're hearing the successes and the human magic. It couldn't have all been perfect. What went wrong?
So one example is in January of 2014, we realized that we had missed our guidance for the sales during November, December. And we knew the street wouldn't like this. In fact, we were right. The share price went from 39 to 26 when we announced that. And then the question then was, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to show up, that day? And so the day before, I gathered all of the executives, the officers, and asked them, tomorrow, how do we show up? Right? Do we surrender and say, you guys were right? We're going to die, so we surrender? Or we ask ourselves, why do we fall, Bruce? Right? In the Batman movie, so that we can learn to pick ourselves up and learn the mistakes we've made, see how we can correct them, get back on the saddle and move forward. So life is not linear. We will make mistakes. And as a leader, it's more about being the thermostat than the thermometer, and then being able to deal with the issues in a transparent and humble fashion.
Yep. Do you, another question, so many companies are focused around purpose and the human magic in different words. Do you see differences in the US culture of moving forward with this versus European companies?
I think there's differences across companies more than geographies. I think the entire world is on this journey. The reason why the entire world is on this journey is that because this comes from our heart as human beings. Now, the way it's being done in Germany, in Germany you have Mitbestimmung, so you have labor representatives on board. But in the US, I don't think we're close to that. But the general philosophy of these leadership principles, right, of the leader not being the know-it-all, but more the learn-it-all, somebody who cares, who is vulnerable and is there to create the right environment. That's universal. The other thing that's universal, Clarke, is that this is hard.
Yeah.
There's really key challenges at each step, and pivoting how we lead and think about these things. That's the journey that so many people are on, and that's why I wanted to share, in this book, a lot of the lessons and practical steps at each step along the way on all of these dimensions. But I think we're all travelers on this journey.
Speaking of hard, how do you balance human-centric approach with the hunger for quarterly profits? You're a public company. You need to be profitable, and yet you need to take time for human magic.
So, Clarke, welcome to the club. 98% of the questions that are asked as either or are better answered as and. So, of course, it's people and profits. It's short-term and long-term. And our role as leader is to take all of this, align all of this in pursuit of our long-term goals. So, and as a leader, never lose, the North Star in the compass. So, that means you start with people, and that means that, you're going to try to deliver progress every quarter. I don't think it's a golden rule that it's a capital sin to miss guidance once in a while. If you're trying to never miss guidance, that means you're not going to try anything, because that's the if you don't try anything, then that's how you hit. But you're going to miss over the long term. Now, the guiding principle is don't do anything stupid that's going to hurt you in the long term. So that's as a CEO and as a board, that's where you navigate. I think we've seen so many great examples last year of companies doing the right thing, that was going to serve them in the long term. My view is that the relationship with the shareholders, they're also human beings. So if you treat them with respect, you tell them where you are, where you're going, and then you keep them on the journey, most of them are going to be fine with that, as long as, you show progress, is my sense.
As you know, I firmly believe the leader of today is this more agile person able to deal with ambiguity, but also communication skills have become so important to this latter point. But let me keep going on questions. Aside from your coach, did you have mentors that not taught you business, but developed your leadership style, or did you find this on your own?
I had so many mentors. My approach, I didn't have, somebody said, Hubert, I'm going to be your mentor, or Clarke, would you like to be my mentor? I think it's being a sponge and observing, being very curious. Oh, I'm seeing, Shari Ballard on my team. She's doing this. This is so interesting. Or Jason in Boston, that's how he asked this question. I'm making notes. Oh, they're doing this here. So it's really being like a sponge and learning from others. That's been my approach. Now, I think for certain people, having a sponsor is actually going to be important. And as leaders, if you can think about being a sponsor for a few individuals, that can make a difference. And in particular, if you're trying to rebalance gender or race diversity, deciding that you're going to be a sponsor for this woman or this Black executive, that would be a good thing.
Yeah. Chief executives have or have not been taking stands on social issues, particularly in the last year. Is that the role of the chief executive? And how do you view a stand on some of these, either social justice, economic, sustainability? How do you view that?
Yeah, our role as leaders has changed fundamentally in the last little while, right? It used to be all about profit maximization. Now it's about being a force for good. It used to be just about business. Now it's about all of the stakeholders. And as we've discussed, our leadership model has changed. Now, we have to be careful, though, because we're not elected officials, right? We've not been tasked with changing the world, with no limit. We're not elected officials. So you need a thoughtful approach. You need filters, and because you're going to be engaged. But you have to be engaged on issues that are relevant to your company, meaning its values, its purpose, its employees, its customers, its community. And that's a first filter. So if you take, you're in Minneapolis, there's the murder of George Floyd. Of course, you're going to be engaged. In fact, everywhere in the US, you can be engaged because you know that as a company, you want your team to represent, the customers and the communities. But it's not just relevance. It's also, it has to be authentic, because if you just say things, but the actions within the company are not there, then you have no credibility. You have to look at what's going to be effective. Sometimes it's less about saying and more about doing. Right? You do need to look at the business impact, but sometimes it shouldn't be the main driver, because values and purpose and your employees, that's going to be critical. But I think we're seeing more and more of this. Last November, we had companies giving PTO for people to be able to vote, because in this country, it's a work day, right, when we have the elections. Getting really engaged on racial inequity. In Minnesota, Best Buy is involved in Connect Minnesota to provide broadband access to kids.
Right.
Why? Because they're the children of our employees, and that really matters to us. Yeah. So yes, get engaged, but be thoughtful. Have a filter. Involve your team in deciding when and how to be engaged.
Right. You talk in the book about moments of struggle in your personal life, and then balancing the demands of your professional life, and that those journeys as they intersect and not. Question of how did you and do you keep up energy physically, personally, intellectually to stay in the moment, to stay present, to lead?
Yeah, That's such a critical question, in particular in this time, right? Because can we agree, Clarke, that as leaders, we get thrown all of these curveballs where there's absolutely no playbook. Right. And so this is a time where we need to be great leaders. So remember when we were flying on airplanes, Clarke, a long time ago, that recollection, and the oxygen mask would come down and we were told, put the mask on yourself first before you help others. And that's what we need to do during this crisis. It means, don't forget to go inside, right? If you cannot go outside during this lockdown, go inside and take the time to think through, reflect, meditate who you are, who you want to be, how do you want to be remembered, and then take care of yourself. So whether it's physical exercise, meditation, breathing, there's a lot of micro steps you can take, journaling, having a personal board of director, that's critical to keep you going. And then being clear about the energy, right? As leaders, it's amazing the impact that our energy level can have on the organization, right? Much more than our brain. It's, when we walk into a room, does the energy level go up or is the oxygen, emptying? In deciding that, how we're going to show up every day. But it takes to take care of ourselves first before we can help others.
Well, Hubert, we promise that people around the world have to move on to other things in the world we live in. This has been fascinating. A reminder, we will post that you can buy the book at hubertjoly.org, and we'll post it right now. The book is, let's remember, this is that profits can be a derivative, that whether we're focused on sustainability or about improving and unleashing human magic, there's more that we can do, and we can balance the profits, etc. I just love to summarize a few of your points. Take on mistakes. We'll make them. It's important to make them. Get feedback. Open yourself up to say, how can I improve? But come back 3 or 4 months later and say, how am I doing? It's the world of and, not either or. And in this world of and, it's hard. No one said it was easy because you've written a book or you've told us for an hour how you did it. But pivot to the practical and realize that it can be hard. Any closing comments, Hubert, for those that are on their leadership journey themselves?
Yeah, I think we are, as a world, we are at a pivotal time, right? We can all agree that it's like the first step of the 12 steps of AA, right? The world we live in, we're in a multifaceted crisis, right? Whether it's health, economic, societal, racial, environmental, geopolitical, you name it. And doing the same thing and hoping for a different outcome is not going to be great. So this is our moment. I think in 10 years, we're going to say, this was their finest hour. And what I see, in all of my interactions with the next generation, and you and I are part of the next generation, we're that generation. The burning desire in people's heart to do the right thing and be a force for good in the world, and be on that journey and working together to create a set of better outcomes, and realizing that I don't need, others to tell me or others to do. It can start with me and my team and where I am today. And I get to create this future that does not exist yet, but that I can shape, and that, of course, I want to make more sustainable. So I wish every fellow traveler on this journey lots of luck. Don't hesitate to reach out to Professor Murphy or to me. And you guys have a great rest of your wonderful day.
Well, thank you, Hubert, and to all of those who attended. We say at our firm, we want to improve the way the world is led. If I take one thing away from Hubert, it is take control of your career, listen to these lessons, and decide how you're going to grab onto your purpose, your team's purpose, your division, and your company's, and make that decision. Thank you, Hubert. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day and a great night. Cheers.
Thank you.